What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to another build update showcase. And today we're taking a look at my sword and shield setups. Now I have two setups in particular, an elemental setup as well as a physical setup for those that don't want to do elemental weapons. But sword and shield is as fun as it's always been. In terms of kill times, this is pretty comparable with a lot of weapons, and in terms of its elemental damage output, I think it's one of the better weapons. Despite that, it is still good as a raw weapon, whereas, you know, dual blades and bow tend to lean more heavily towards elements. I think sword and shield is unique in that it can play both roles just fine. So regardless of which playstyle you want to go for, sword and shield is still a fantastic choice. One thing I want to touch on is more people have had a chance to do the math. Our ideal combo is just the lateral return, spinning rising, spinning reaper into charge chop, basically the BBB, YB, hold YB combo. But with that in mind, you know, don't sleep on the rest of the kit. You know, sliding swipe is still awesome for mobility. Our regular Y chains are awesome for mobility. Obviously, we still have the stun capacity with the shield attacks. We still have the leaps and whatnot, and going on the leaps and going into punches or plunges, whatever the case is. And I think that's one of the things I really want people to keep in mind if you're playing Sword and Shield, is if, you know, the nice thing about Sword and Shield is, honestly, it's one of the most flexible weapons in the game, and you don't want to just lock yourself into doing one combo over and over again, because there's so much in this kit, and it's all very solid, so don't sleep on it. Either way, let's take a look at the builds. So first up, we're going to talk about the general use physical build. And so this one right here. Now, Ardian weapons will pull ahead, big surprise there. But if you don't want to mess with Ardian, the Ajara sub Inda is still incredibly good. You know, 210 true raw, 10 affinity, 180 blast, healthy amount of white sharpness, comes with offensive guard already built in, so you can run offensive guard and razor sharp without issue. And it's a very solid weapon in its own right. So if you don't want to deal with Ardians, I still highly stand behind this. And it's honestly my favorite sword and shield design of the game. I mean, it's a giant gauntlet. The sword itself looks sick. It's very good. But Ardian will obviously come ahead just because it's Ardian. Now, taking a look at the weapon in particular, you would go 3 attacks, and then for reinforcement, 4 attacks and a sharpness boost. If you're struggling with sharpness, you could go 3 attacks and then 2 sharpness boosts, and it's really going to come down to preference. Sword and Shield tends to gobble through sharpness, but this is usually enough where I can get by with a single sharpen per hunt. So I'm okay with that. If you are like, no, I hate sharpening, then probably go 3 attack, 2 sharpness boosts. Like I said, we're pinching pennies at this point. It's going to be such a minor difference. In terms of the gear, though, we're going to be running the Fulgar helm, which will give us 2 points agitator, and then we got might in there. The Arc Vulcan mail for the Wex, the Guardian Arcveld Van Braces for Wex, the Guardian Arcveld coil, which I'm going to talk more about in just a second, and then the Udra Mire Greaves for the point of burst. Now, instead, if you don't want to mess with Flare, you could just swap to the Arc Vulcan coil and then go here and swap this over to agitator. And then, you know, we're effectively going to have the same thing. We have an extra point of challenger that we wouldn't need anymore. And we could swap that out for a mighty and effectively get 5 Wex, 5 Agi, 3 maximum might, and our point of burst. And so we're pulling a lot of damage into the build with this particular setup. With that being said, right now, the math around Flare is a little bit weird. I was testing it on stream, and I saw an incredibly minor difference in terms of the wounding capability and tests against the dummy. I've seen other people that have tested it against monsters and noticed it's more impactful in monster fights. Other people have reported that levels 2 and 4 of Flare are going to function more properly in terms of making wounds, whereas levels 1, 3, and 5 are going to function better in terms of the little burst of damage that it generates. So I know this is a lot of info. The basic breakdown here is Flare is really weird at the moment. It's not linear. Different levels of Flare are doing different things. Hopefully this gets addressed in the future. Regardless, though, running the Guardian Arcveld coil here is going to allow me to pick up access to Decimator. And Decimator as a set bonus is something I really, really like. We are popping wounds left and right with Sword and Shield. It is a very good weapon for generating wounds, and we get the bonus attack where, you know, if there's a white part of the wound, we can like pre-break it and then also go for a wound break. So Decimator just feels good with Sword and Shield. So regardless of what the situation with Flare is, I wanted to work 2 pieces of Guardian Arcveld into the set to take advantage of that. And honestly, I mean, we're sacrificing 1 point of agitator, and in exchange we're picking up 2 points of Flare, but more importantly Decimator. I think that's going to be worthwhile. In terms of the deco loadouts, we have protection, we have shockproof, we have an extra protection that snuck in there. This could be adapt, I guess. So shockproof, adapt, 3 protection, mighty, challenger, mighty. Pull all that together, we're going to hit max might, we're going to hit agi 4, wex 5, point of burst. Now, if you don't like mighty, which maximum might is, it's a little bit of a weird choice for sword and shield. So the max might has been changed to where we could do, you know, once it is up, we could do 1 singular dodge and still maintain max might. However, if we do a back hop, it's going to instantly wear off. So, you know, our whole plunge max might isn't going to be back up. It's going to take 3 seconds to come back up. And so it's definitely a weird choice. While we are running through our ground game and we're, you know, doing all this, we're getting that 30% benefit from max might. So that is nice, you know, because out of there we can roll and go back into it. And all this time I'm maintaining max might. So as long as I'm not excessively back hopping, I am getting that extra crit from max might, which is nice. But obviously losing it on the back hops is less than ideal. So if you don't want to run max might, there are some alternatives here. You could just go 3 earplugs and have comfort to where you never deal with roars. I had actually tried doing 3 part breaker, but I got some really weird numbers on the test. Basically, I had like 1 portion of my wound break attack was going up, and I don't know if it's just wonky with sword and shield because it's like multi-hits on the wound break or what the deal is, but basically I had very inconsistent results trying to use 3 points part breaker. In theory, it sounds fantastic, you know, an extra 30% when we are breaking a wound with our focus strike sounds phenomenal because we're breaking wounds left and right. But in tests, it seemed like something is off there. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's something with sword and shield, but it was not looking all that good in the testing I did earlier. But either way, I mean, if you don't want mighty, there's a bunch of different things you could slot in. You know, you could go jumping, you could go earplugs, you could go ambush. I would not recommend coalescence. That's going to be an elemental only thing. You could go counter, but to be honest, I feel like it's you need to like try and get hit with sword and shield just because it's so easy to just dodge through stuff. But if you're getting hit every 30 seconds, you know, counter strike is just going to be an extra 25 raw. So that's definitely a solid choice. But all in all, very comfortable build. And if you know you want 1 sword and shield build that's going to do it all, this will get the job done. Like I said, you don't even need to go Ardian for this. You could instead go with the Ajara. We could slot in Razor Sharp over here. You know, Razor Sharp hand, ideally Razor Sharp Handicraft, wherever that's at. You could slot a Razor Sharp Handicraft, and if you don't want this stuff, we could even go critical boost. We could go crit boost 2, crit boost 1, and now this is effectively like it's very close to what we had. You know, the only real difference between this and our blast is going to be the blast had 1 extra point of handicraft, and obviously the base stats of having higher flat raw. But the Ajara is very solid. Now moving on to build number 2. This is typically what I'm doing now, and this is elemental sword and shield. Now, briefly, before jumping into the elemental build, I want to talk about doing elemental damage, because this came up a lot on the dual blade video. People are like, oh, are water dual blades the best? Should I be using water? And what you should be doing is going into the monster field guide. So monster field guide, large monster field guide, and then you look at your monsters. You go over 1 tab, you hit the button, and we can see the elemental hit zones here. So looking at Chatacabra, I can see he is 2-star to thunder on his head, his tongue, his torso, his left and right hind legs, and then 1-star on his forelegs and 2-star on his rear. So in this case, if I'm fighting a Chatacabra, I'm going to want a weapon that deals lightning or thunder damage. Now, some monsters aren't going to be all that good to fight with elemental. For example, taking a look at Arkveld, he's 1-star to pretty much everything, and his chain blades themselves are going to be immune. So this is a fight where I would prefer to bring blast or poison in. But if I'm instead fighting like a Rathian, you know, Rathian, 2-star dragon head, torso, left wing, right wing, tail, and his legs are 1-star, I'm bringing dragon damage, and dude is getting blown up. So if you are playing with element, you want to look at the monster you're going up against ahead of time, and you want to bring the corresponding element that's going to hurt that monster the most. You know, fighting a Rathian with fire, I'm not going to be doing any damage. Now, if that is all knocked out, let's actually jump in and take a look at the build. And so once again, we are going to be working with Ardian. When it comes to element, Ardian is, you know, best in slot. We're going to be going 3 attack infusions, and then I like 4 element and 1 sharpness. You could go 3 element and 2 sharpness, similar to the raw setup, just to maintain that sharpness a little bit longer. In general, you know, I think I've mentioned this before, I think, but 2 sharpness, you probably won't have to sharpen. With 1 sharpness, you're going to probably sharpen once in the hunt. But when you add in things like Wetfish Fin Plus, you know, it takes a second and a half, or you do it while the monster is enraging or whatever the case is. You have a clear window, so I'm fine with that. Offensive guard blaze, razor sharp blaze, crit element blaze. The math on crit element isn't the best. It's like, math-wise, it works out to... Basically, our crits are going to do like 21% more damage in terms of the element, which it's really not a lot. You know, if our elements will be hitting for 10, instead they're going to be hitting for 12. But with this particular deco configuration, it's free. And the alternative would be like, I guess, Guardian Handicraft, Razor Sharp Handicraft, Blaze Handicraft, which would be the equivalent of rolling an additional sharpness roll. But like I said, 1 sharpen takes half a second. We might as well just put crit element in. It's free. Taking a look at the gear, Arc Vulcan Helm Beta, Arc Vulcan Mail Beta, Guardian Arc Felt Van Braces, and then I like to go for the 2 points gore here, maxing out that antivirus and picking up the 3-2 slot in the waist. And so pulling all this together, we get Burst up at level 5, we have Wex up at level 4, we have Divine Blessing at 3, we have Coal up at 3, we have Antivirus at 3, and we even have a little point of Convert Element, which is going to allow us to get up that nice little Dragon Burst that comes up periodically. And all in all, this works very nice. We have Haste and Recovery, we have Black Eclipse on, and this feels like a very comfortable elemental build. Now, briefly, just to talk about meta, I've had a lot of people asking, like, you know, is this a meta build? I'll be honest with you, almost none of my builds are going to be meta builds. Meta stands for most effective tactics available, and in the context of Monster Hunter, meta builds are typically optimized to get as much damage as possible, and specifically damage. They don't tend to prioritize quality of life skills or things that make builds more comfortable. So in this case, things like Divine Blessing, things like Shock Absorber, those typically aren't going into meta builds. You know, I have Haste and Recovery because I like having the availability to just get a little heal in combat just as I continue to deal damage, and stuff like that is going to be lower priority with meta. So none of the builds I upload are what I would consider to be meta builds. I do think they would be competitive builds. I think they're very comfortable builds, and you know, you're still going to be seeing sub 5-minute hunts with most of these once you get the weapon down. But I just want to be clear that these are not meant to be meta builds. They aren't meant to be, you know, this is the absolute most DPS possible mathematically. That's just not how I play Monster Hunter. But yeah, so like, I mean, on that note, you know, Coalescence, from a meta perspective, people are like, oh, Coal's, you know, not very good. But I'm playing an elemental build. I want to max out my element. I want to hit the element cap. You know, that is how my brain works. I'm playing element. I want as much element as possible. Which, on that note, talking about the elemental cap, I had a lot of people asking about this as well. So if we are at the dummy here, go to training settings, I'll put Coalescence on. And with Coalescence, you can see I'm up to 612 fire. And then if I start attacking to where burst gets up, you can see I'm up to 752 fire. And the number turning orange, that means that I hit the elemental cap for fire damage. So even if I were to add in Absorb Element, this particular Sword and Shield can't get any more fire damage. And that makes me happy, you know, just the max fire damage. Like that's what I want when I'm running an elemental build. Now the elemental cap is going to change between different weapons. So some weapons are going to need more, some are going to need less. An easy way to check this is something like this, where you have 5 burst, Coalescence, and you have access to elemental absorption. If you have all those skills on and you're hitting the dummy, it's going to be near impossible for you to not hit the elemental cap. So, you know, just taking whatever, let's just do, you know, Switch Axe. Switch Axe right now is at 490. If I were to Coalescence, Elemental Absorb, we'll put on Convert Element as well. And I'll just get a couple hits in here. $760 element. If I were to pull out a different weapon and start hitting, it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to discover, you know, what's the most damage this weapon can get. But, you know, once again, this is just for discovering the cap. You don't have to hit the elemental cap. I just, you know, the idea of orange number makes brain happy is what it comes down to for me. But either way, that is going to cover it for the builds. We're going to be hunting with the elemental build. Got a Ushiguma on deck, so let's hop on over to the arena and show the hunt. Thought I still had a Ushiguma up, but apparently he's dead. So looks like we're going to go for a Shuwu instead. which obviously means I've swapped over to ice. You know, going back to what I said previously, go to our monster guide, look at the monster. I can see ice is going to mess him up, so that works out. Probably could have brought along the counter strike without him getting hit. Ooh, stop that. I think I've gotten off a single block yet. With the element in general, we're not prioritizing our shield attacks because elemental damage comes from our sword, which is why you see me doing very few shielded attacks here. Bro, it is Wound City for this poor guy. Oh my god, he's dead. Shu Will just got the business. This thing was really weak to ice, so not that surprising. Give me your goodies. That's the beauty of elemental damage, though, man. Like when you're fighting a target that has the right weak points, like it's 223. That's fast. A very quick kill. You know, similar to the dual blade build, just to show the difference. But let's do the same hunt real fast. We'll do it with blast, just to show y'all the overall difference between like running physical versus running elemental against a proper elemental matchup. And I mean, it's gonna be comparable. You know, it's not like this is gonna be like 5 minutes slower or anything. I really wish we could get more of the apexes in here. We'll have to fight like a Ray Dow here. I hate how delayed that attack is. Yeah. The other nice thing about Element is when you're playing against something that has the good elemental hit zones, we're getting a lot of stagger in those hit zones because it's like it's weak to no, it's weak to ice. So by now, I mean, he's already getting kind of stagger locked, you know. So now he's moving around. They're still doing good damage. It's just messed my offensive guard there. Give me that one. Might save me a bit of time on the hunt. He didn't get a head bonk last time. There we go. So that was 4:03 compared to before. We got like 2.5 minutes. I mean, there was definitely a fair amount more run around there just because I couldn't quite get the knockdowns that I needed to really start chaining wound breaks. And, you know, it's something that has elemental weaknesses. That's part of the reason why I like Element, man. I don't know. Maybe it's just confirmation bias, but for me, I feel like, you know, I had a very similar test fighting Rathalos with like a Dragon SAD Charge Blade versus a Impact Charge Blade, and once all the Dragon just started pumping into him, bro just could not get up. And that's why I like playing Element. It's a lot of fun. So either way, we're going to wrap this one up here. Up next, I'll probably do Switch Axe. To be honest, I'm just kind of going in order of the weapons that I find myself playing the most. And, I'll probably cover everything, but I definitely want to at least get out the stuff that I'm really enjoying. So either way, thanks for coming on by, and I'll see you next time.